I challenge you as a believer, let that power get out.
Blind people received their sight. People have been carried in. We're healed. Nobody touched them. Nobody laid a hand on them. We just praised the Lord and spoke the word of faith, and God began to heal the people.
Here's a fish.
Yeah, let's go!
Oh my gosh, he's a pig.
He landed inside.
He kept me from, God, look how massive this is.
The Casting Faith Podcast.
Fish on.
Welcome back to the Casting Faith Podcast. Today we have an absolute powerhouse on the show, Fred Parrott. He's an author.
There he is.
Fitness influencer, UPCI minister, drummer, and father of 6. You heard me, 6 kids. Yes. So if you think you're busy, wait until you hear this guy's schedule. But Fred, we're so excited that you're on. Also have Sean Delaney.
Yep.
So we're excited.
Still here.
Yeah, still here. We're excited for this episode, and we'll probably have a series here. But Fred is an author. He just wrote a book called The Power For. It dives into how spiritual and physical discipline go hand in hand, and we can't wait to unpack that with him. But before we do that, I have a story for you guys. Ready?
Let's hear it.
All right, buckle up, because this is one of those only in Ohio stories. So there's this dude. He's out on Lake Erie, right? And you think of that, and you think he's on Erie on some kind of fishing charter, right? Or on a boat.
Yeah.
He's not on some fancy fishing boat with all the bells and whistles. This man is on a kayak on Lake Erie. A kayak.
That's not wise.
No.
Probably should not do that.
A kayak. One of those plastic bathtubs that you kind of like paddle around in. Everybody here has been on a kayak before. It's not the most stable thing, right?
Oh, I almost tipped over.
Yeah. So he's fishing for steelhead on the lake, which we've talked about before. When you're fishing for steelhead on the lake, there's different regulations for bag limits than there is when you're fishing the tributaries and also in different seasons. But he's fishing for steelhead on a kayak in the middle of Lake Erie, which is crazy. Now, before we get deeper into this story, if you never fought a steelhead, which Fred has not yet, but we're going to get him out there.
Let's go.
It's not like you're bobber fishing for bluegill and it's a tiny little bite and it's fun for 2 seconds and you reel it in and it's done. Steelhead, they're pretty aggressive fish. When you hook into them, they don't just let you reel them in. It's a bit of a fight. They're fast. They fight like their life depends on it, which if I'm fishing for them, their life does depend on it because it's going to go in the freezer, right? But this guy casts out and he hooks into one on a kayak. And here's where the story gets crazy. The fish doesn't just fight back. It takes control. It grabs the hook. It takes the line. And normally when you're reeling in a fish, you're fighting the fish, but the fish was winning this fight. And so this guy, he's reeling in this fish. He's on his kayak. He's in a full-blown nautical tug of war with this fish. This fish starts dragging the kayak across the lake. I'm talking full speed across the lake. The dude is spinning in circles, water splashing everywhere. People from the shore are probably laughing, wondering what he's doing. And this guy is hanging on for dear life, trying to fish for this fish, keep this fish on the thing. So he's got his paddle in one hand, trying to paddle. He's got his rod tip bent over, and this steelhead's just dragging him on. And you would think, like, steelhead's probably not going to be able to pull you very far. But I have fished on a kayak before, and I've caught a catfish that dragged me across the reservoir. So it's a thing. So this simple fishing trip is turning into a workout for this dude. So you got the back exercise of trying to paddle, the stability in the core, trying to keep the kayak from flipping, all while this monstrous fish, probably state Ohio fish, is dragging him across Lake Erie. He's battling against the waves and all the other things too. And so it must have felt like forever, but this is the amazing thing. The dude catches the fish and he lands it on a kayak in the middle of Lake Erie, and he rows back to shore, completely exhausted, but with his trophy in hand. Probably questioning some of his choices,
I'm
but
not rowing
he's
back.
grinning
I'm
ear
not
to
rowing
ear.
back.
There was no trolling motor.
No.
He
there
rowed
is.
back.
He caught it. He caught the trolling motor.
Yeah, yeah.
Just throw the fish back in.
He wasn't in control. Yeah, just keep it going. But Fred, this reminds me of what you talk about a lot in the Power Four with discipline and grit. This guy, if you're fishing like that, you have to be prepared for that kind of a fight. Now, it's not a thing that I would advise. If you're steelhead, I steelhead fish from like the rivers and the banks and stuff like that. If at most I'm wading in the water for it, But if you're fishing on a kayak in the middle of Lake Erie, you have to be in somewhat of some kind of physical shape. And this is not what Fred's book is all about, but discipline is what his book is about. And so we want to dive into that today.
Absolutely. Now, before we do that, I'm not a fisherman by any means. We're going to get out
Yet.
on the water soon. Yes, yet. But would you say that what he engaged in was an unnecessary struggle?
He had a bad idea, I would say. Wouldn't you, Sean?
Yeah, that was.
So what I mean
not
is,
very wise.
so he had a victory.
I would probably go out there and fish like that.
You would?
Maybe
Dumb
not
ways
on
to
the
die.
lake. It just depends on the wind direction and how the waves are.
It's Lake Erie.
But if it's a south wind, then you're good. If the wind's coming from the north, then no. I've been out there when like it goes from like no waves to like rollers and then 4 or 5 foot waves instantly too. So it is kind of dangerous.
I'll put it this way. That's like a 20-year-old mistake.
But there's a time.
like if you're me in my 20s might have done that. Which kind of tells you the answer to that. It's probably not the wisest things. It was
I'd
unnecessary.
recommend to not. I would assume that there's many better ways to go about that.
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, I guess he was disciplined enough to see it through.
But dude got his back exercise in. His leg day was in.
He's sore the next day.
He's sore. Yeah, he had a full body.
He probably called off work next day.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I appreciate you guys for having me on. Man, this is awesome.
Yeah, we're excited.
What you guys are doing. Yeah, so the Power 4, so it deals with planning. So there's 4 main principles that I deal with here with the Power 4. So we're talking about prayer as number 1, and then planning, preparation, and production. So those are the 4 P's of the Power 4. But discipline, as you mentioned, is required for these principles to work. So a disciplined person would be a very focused person. Very focused, very driven, and consistent. So the plan, if you don't have a plan, then you're pretty much, I say, it's cliche to say planning to fail if you don't have a plan, but it's really the way it works. And you have to have the discipline to be consistent with it. Actually, I was talking to someone today, I was telling Sean before we started recording, somebody that was telling me about, it was essentially, they were ultimately giving me various excuses as to why something didn't happen. And so I'm listening, gave the individual time to explain themselves. I was courteous in that way. But me as somebody who was very disciplined when it comes to time management, plan, like you guys know, if I say I'm going to be somewhere, I'm going to be there. If I say a time, that's what it's going to be.
Not 9 minutes late.
So I wasn't going to say that at all. There was, I guess, the spirit of conviction fell on our brother, and he just had to tell him. But I'm talking about somebody else, right? And good person, business owner, is crushing it in his field. But there's some things from a discipline standpoint, if we're going to navigate there in the conversation, right? Some things that the person was kind of struggling with. So I kind of was giving, I guess you would call it like a free consultation, where it's like, hey, you are your patterns. So what you say is one thing, but if you're not the person that shows up, that lines up with the words, then there's a conflict there. So if you're a disciplined person, you're going to be the person that says the thing, but then does the thing, and you become the thing. So you are your patterns, which is what I said, and kind of looked at me, but understood it after a while and it wasn't a negative trying to tear somebody down thing. It was like, hey, if you're a person of your word, be a person of your word. It's not easily becoming disciplined, but if you have a plan, if you focus on the plan, write it down. Bible says write the vision, right? There's a reason Bible says that. I think mainly if you don't write it down, you're going to forget. Yeah. I know I'll forget if I don't write things down. So writing it down, it gives you something, gives you a blueprint. It gives you something to look at, something to measure yourself against. And that's really how it works.
Yeah. Yeah. I know there's a lot of people out there who weren't raised maybe with the understanding of discipline. And so this is a lot of times, you could learn that through a sport. Your parents, if you have great parents, they're going to teach you discipline. But for those who do not have that, maybe they come up with a different background or upbringing, and they weren't privileged to have parents to teach them these principles. How would you speak to somebody who maybe they know and see that there's a need to have discipline in their life? Because it does affect your whole life and anything that you choose to do. How would you go about helping somebody to discipline life if they weren't raised with that?
Well, so I would say first, the person, they would need to give themselves some grace to grow, because you have to first acknowledge that this is an area of improvement. Like that's why I tell my kids, it sounds better, right? This is an area of improvement, something that you can get better in. So it's not beating them down saying, hey, you're a terribly undisciplined person. That's not going to help anybody, right? So, hey, this is where you can improve, and let's make a plan for it, right? So it goes back to the four P's, the Power Four. First, if they're not already implementing or have a prayer life, that's number one, critical and essential. Because what I would submit to you is that when you pray, that is when God is able to download to you what you should be doing. Because sometimes you can have a plan, but if you haven't prayed over that plan, maybe it's just an idea that you have, but it's not what you're supposed to, maybe it's not the will and purpose that God has for your life. So obviously, as we are men of faith, we believe that we submit our plans to God. You know, we talk to our pastor, whoever is in your life, and then you, after you pray, then you start your plan from there. So I would say that that's the beginning, praying, and then making a plan. We said a few minutes ago about writing the vision. If you don't write it down, because what I found in people that I talk to every day that don't have a plan, it reveals itself in kind of the dysfunction of their day, where they're all over the place, they're doing this and doing that. And I'm talking about also a lot of people that are really productive. No, we're not talking about making money and things like that, but people that are have good careers, let's say that, right? But don't really have a plan. And the funny thing is, people that have purchased the book since then and said, hey, you know, this was really simple and practical, thank you. And it was written that way to be short, concise, to the point, give you a blueprint to say, hey, even people that are kind of killing it in their field, we can always get a little bit better. So but back to what you were saying is, I would tell the person, listen, you need to be praying, make a plan. Plan needs to be very detailed. What do I want to do? What am I trying to do? Does that person even know what their purpose is? Because they can be aligned as well. Somebody's just trying to become more disciplined, but what does that mean to someone who has never been disciplined or has not had an example of what discipline looks like? Because that could be kind of a daunting task to say, hey, you need to be more disciplined. Say, for example, it's a child that grew up, didn't have a curfew, didn't have a bedtime. You know, I'm older, so when I was a child, they called them latchkey kids, right? But you may be dealing with somebody like that. So discipline may be a foreign concept to that individual. So you kind of got to do some legwork to unpack what is it that they need to know about discipline. You might have to explain to them literally what discipline is. Like you might be the example of what a disciplined person is. And then from there, you can go into the things of the structure of making a plan. And then how do you prepare? How do you produce? Which are all components of the Power Four. But everyone has a different starting point. And that's why I started out with saying give them the grace to grow and grace to understand, okay, where are you at? They have to find themselves in the process before they can go, if that makes sense.
So what was the burden behind writing the book? Was it to help people like that, or was it just to give people a pathway to a more disciplined life? Like, what drove you to write the book?
So the origins of the book stem from a conversation that I was having with a friend. This friend at this time was having some difficulty in his marriage. Great guy, minister as well. Not in our organization, but friend from childhood. So essentially, going through a rough patch. Was really busy, doing great on his job, but work-life balance was struggling, so family life was struggling, marriage was struggling as a result, juggling a lot of different things, trying to anyway. And so in the course of the conversation, it was a long conversation. It was productive. You know, I was letting him vent a little bit, then I was listening, and then was just giving some wisdom. And at one point in the conversation, I was like, man, you just got to pray, plan, prepare, and produce. And it came out just like that. And it was funny because I said, well, hold on a second. I got to write that down. That was literally the origins from that conversation. And I didn't know it was going to turn into a book. I just knew that that was God that was speaking right there when I was talking to him. But more to answer your question, that was the origin of it. But in daily conversations with people, there's so many people who on the outside look like they're really prepared, have a great plan, know what they're doing. And it's not to say anything negative about certain people or people that I talk to, but in conversation, you can see that, okay, there's no structure here. There's no real rhyme or reason to the day. And people that are doing great in their field, but it's like they kind of just do things. And at the end of the day, they're like, oh, I'm so tired. I didn't get this done. I didn't get to that. I didn't get to this. And I'm like, well, did you prioritize, like, what was most important in this day for you? And this is random conversations happening with people. Like, I kind of felt like I was like a therapist of sorts or something, right? And I'm like, well, what did you do today? And they're telling me all these different things. And I'm like, well, what needed to get done? And I'm like, I don't know. Or sometimes they have an idea, but it's like, okay, so you don't have a plan. And sometimes, like, when I'm in that mode, it's like it can sound like I'm being really frank and everything, but it's not trying to be a negative. It's like, okay, so you don't have a plan. Or basically, you let the day get away from you. You weren't organized. And like, oh, well, no, it kind of get defensive. And it's like, all right, well, let's unpack your 24. What did you do from the time you woke up to the time you went to bed? And I say that because for all of us, there's going to be time within that 24 hours that was wasted. Time that was scrolling social media, time that was meaningless text messages, something that could have waited, or you responding or doing something that wasn't the highest and best use of your time. And what I tell people is you have to avoid the trap of letting people invite you into their day, or worse, inviting you into their dysfunction, because you become a part of what they have going on. Then you never get to what you need to do. Then at the end of the day, you're unfulfilled, you're tired, you're aggravated. I have so much stuff to do to get done, and I didn't get done. Well, I'm like, well, listen, I tell people, make a top 3 priorities for your day. These are 3 things that have to get done no matter what. Everything else that can be on the optional list or the we'll see if we get to a list. And one person in particular, the next day, texted me, was like, that was so simple, but that was amazing. I prioritized these 3 things, I did it, and I feel great.
Wow.
What happens when you plan for the day, you make a list or whatever you do, and something comes up? For instance, if I get a flat tire on my car, that's a 4 to 6 hour ordeal because I have no spare. Half of my day is shot. What do you do, like, if you can't stick to your plan for that day? Like, how do you navigate that?
So you have to also be able to pivot. So your plan is your plan. But if something comes up that is absolutely unavoidable, then what do you do with that time? So in this instance, are you getting towed with the car, or are you just like sitting on the side of the road for 4 to 6 hours? Like, what does this scenario look like?
Yes. So this scenario actually happened just recently. So let's say I prepared for this day. I was on my way to work, 3:30, 4 a.m., and I got a flat tire on the turnpike. I was on the turnpike from 4 a.m. till like 9, and then towed with the car to a tire place until like 1:30 or so before I was done and back on the road.
Okay. So
So
the
like
work
from
day is pretty
4
much
a.m. till almost 1 o'clock, yeah.
Okay. So that's obviously very frustrating because you can't get into the office and you can't work. So if that's already understood, okay, I'm not getting into the office until 2:33 if I'm even going to go in.
Yeah.
Maybe the whole day is shot as far as not going to the office. All right. So what do I do with this time? So like what if you had a top 3 list and they all involved something that you had to do inside the office, that's one thing. But if that's the case, okay, what else can I do? Like, am I going to better myself with an audiobook? Like, you have to have another plan. And because I know, obviously, our first feeling is going to be frustrated and flesh kicks in. It's like, man, I really want to do this, that, and the third. Can't do it. And we want to just sit and be, angry, frustrated. But pivot out of that as quickly as you can.
Because that's not really productive.
Yeah.
To just be upset and stay upset in that moment.
And so then, because you're still going to be stuck there physically.
Yeah.
So what else can I do? 'Cause for me, I just would have let work know, let my wife know, and I'll probably start writing another book or something productive.
That's way more productive than I was.
or writing a podcast outline. You know what I mean?
Scroll.
Like, what else can you? Yeah, because the temptation is going to be
Reel after reel.
Yeah.
right. So we've all been there, right? Where we're just because that's the mind-numbing activity of. Let me just scroll. We've all done it. So we're not beating anybody up. If you're listening and that's what you do, I get it.
I'm there with you.
Yeah, we've all done it. So what I'm saying is, yes, that's real. But maybe discipline yourself to, okay, I'm going to 10, 15 minutes, social media, I'm going to scroll, I'm going to laugh, do whatever. And then now I'm going to do some writing, do some journaling, or whatever it is that you do that's in the realm of productive.
Yeah.
Because if we scroll for 3-4 hours, then all we did was we were using the time that was spent. So we go back to our 24. First, you don't get that time back. You can't go back in time and become productive in those 3-4 hours. Mm-hmm. Those hours are gone. And then so you have to ask yourself, what could I have done that was productive? Even if it's simple as I'm just going to sit here and pray and have a Bible study with myself. Or I'm going to call Charlie. Charlie's working, so you have to call somebody
You
else.
can still call me. I think, no.
He'll text you back, praying for you. But no, seriously, like, how do we use our time? Because everybody at the end of the day will say that. Not, I can't say everybody. That's but the point is, the average person end of the day says, "They wish they had more time. I didn't have enough time." Right.
Right.
So if you examine your day. That was 3-4 hours. And we've probably been in similar things where something happened, we're at a doctor's office, where something's happening that we didn't really account for, and we're using the time unwisely. So that's what I try to get people to. And I know it's not the most fun topic, discipline is. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's fun. So,
Yeah, most people think of discipline, and it's like, I was raised by my grandparents, and they're like the pick your switch generation. And so when you think of the word discipline,
go off that tree and pick one.
Yeah. You're thinking bad, because discipline means somebody's getting whooped. So to tell yourself discipline yourself,
Man,
it's already got that kind of negative feeling for most people.
It does. I'm going to have to find a scripture while we're talking about it, because you made me think of something.
Is there a long term? Is this more short term focused?
Pray, plan, prepare, produce. It's a lifestyle.
Okay.
And what I mean is, it's
So
something.
are you planning like long term, or is it just 24 hours a day each day? Or,
It can be whatever you need it to be.
okay.
So I have one that's for every day. I have one that's for the month. That's more so with myself and my wife. We're trying to accomplish in the household. And then one for the year. So there's different ones, because the plan is relative to what I'm trying to do. If it's for this day, I had a plan for this day. I had to wake up early, and I was preparing myself mentally, spiritually to play, right? So that's one part. Then I know that I had to be over here at a certain time. There was a plan for that, which means that for me, I want to eat, have some coffee, just 15 minutes to kind of detach, and then head over here. Like that's a plan that I don't tell anybody about, but that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
That's for the day. Then there's more of a long-term plan for started writing the second book, which is the book on prayer. I know when I want to be done with it, but that's a different plan, because that's for something that goes into next year, But it comes to like being disciplined, is holding yourself accountable to, it's essentially what you say you're going to do. And you hold yourself accountable to it, because if you have to become the person who is the thing. That's really what it is.
Yeah. So it's for all aspects of your life, not just just something.
Everything.
Yeah.
And it's not just something that, a 4-piece sounds cool. It does sound cool, but it's easy to remember, but it's practical, but it's powerful.
Yeah.
Because if you apply it, that's when you unlock something, because my plan is different from yours, which is different from yours.
Yeah.
And that's the magic of it.
There's another book. This had me thinking of it. Not the same principles, but going back to your story of when your tire went flat. It's called The Tyranny of the Urgent. I know that talked to that about this in previous episodes, where sometimes life just throws you a curveball, like a flat tire in a Tesla, and you can't change it because there's no spare, right? And that's very frustrating. Well, that's an urgent matter. The Tyranny of the Urgent, I think Charles Hummel wrote this book. It refers to the concept of pressing immediate tasks taking precedence over important long-term goals. And so kind of along the lines of what
like
you're
that.
talking about. So it's basically this, the urgent things in life will become a tyranny on your life if you let it. They'll tyrannize you over time, preventing you to become what you're meant to become, to accomplish the goals that you set out to accomplish. And so discipline, without discipline, you're never going to stumble into succeeding in a goal unless that goal wasn't worth setting in the first place.
That's good.
You know, anything worth setting out to do is going to take effort and discipline.
Yeah.
But you can't let the little things in life ruin, even major things that are urgent, ruin your opportunity at those goals. So I think that's an important thing. And one of the things about your book is that it gives people a very simple guide to follow if they weren't raised with that opportunity. And so I guess another question I have for you is, have you always been so structured in your life, in your day-to-day, or is this something that you learned over time? Can you kind of give us some insight on young Fred and what led you to this revelation?
Oh man, young Fred. I feel like my mom was listening right now.
You're an OG.
I am an OG. I said to Sean earlier that, I'm okay with being an OG. I'm 43, right? So old enough to qualify as OG, but I don't feel my age, and I don't think I look my age either. So I'm okay with it.
He's like LeBron James, in case the listeners can't hear or see. Oh no, the listeners can't see.
He's so
this is like
disciplined
LeBron James
in his lifestyle that he doesn't look 43. He's got more energy than I do.
He can outball all of us.
Yes.
God is good.
And
God has been
outlive.
kind to us. But no, young me was disorganized, wasn't timely, wasn't punctual. I was I think the scriptures. So when I was a child, I spake as a child. Well, I spake and acted as a child. I was kind of just all over the place. And it really wasn't until my 20s when it hit me. I came to a service or something I came to late, and it was an elder of the church that was just, they seemed to be so disappointed that I was late. And I don't think I was doing anything, but what they said to me essentially was, you're an example to people behind you. Like, to summarize it, I mean, this is like 30 years ago, but it was a long time ago. I was in my 20s, so like 20 years ago. But essentially what I got from it was, people are watching your example. To this point, had not, early 20s, hadn't considered that there were people that were looking at me and watching what I'm doing, what I'm saying, what my example is. And it was like, oh, okay, I get it. So that started the being a more timely person, punctual person, the person that I am now, the more consistent person, and obviously not perfect, but very, I would say the word is intentional. I'm intentional about it. Like, if I'm late, something really crazy has happened in the household with one of the kids, or something happened that was out of our control. And, but 9.9 times out of 10, I'm on time, as everyone, you guys would attest to.
Is there any, so for me, like, I know me and you are always the ones that are at church on time and first. It was actually in the first YouTube video. But for me, there's kind of like a slight FOMO.
The Lord was there first.
Like fear of missing out. Yeah. Some sort of fear of missing out on something for me. Do you have any of that? Does that drive your being on time like it does for me, or is that something different?
No, the time is the time.
Yeah.
So if I'm going to be somewhere, that's where I'm going to be. Like, if rehearsal, band's supposed to be there 8:30, right? So I'm there at 8:20.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to walk in and then be rushed. So it is something I have to, if we're all riding together in my house, that obviously trying to get teenagers and 5 and 6, 7, and all different age groups that I have
6 kids
together at one time.
My.
Yeah, so from age
You think you're busy.
age 17 down to 6 is what I have right now. That's the range. So
No wonder you're so disciplined.
So that means waking them, they have to be up. At the latest, they have to be up at 7.
Yeah.
At the latest, to be out the door by 8 o'clock.
Wow.
So I was late to this podcast, but I was also raised by my grandparents. And one of my first jobs was working with my grandpa. Started a trucking company, and I would go with him. We would get up at 5. We'd go into the shop. We would turn everything on, get everything set up for the day, get a hold of the dispatchers, do a bunch of different things. But there was no tolerance for being late. It was just, this is when we're leaving. You have a place to be. This is where you're going to go. I think if I didn't get up and go with him, I wasn't going. I would get left behind, which means I didn't get paid that day. So I had to get up and go with him. And so it's one of those concepts I feel like isn't really pushed on the younger generation that we are privileged to serve, is just being where you're supposed to be when you're supposed to be there. And it's one of my biggest pet peeves when I'm late because I mismanaged my 24.
Yeah,
you know, I mismanage my time. And for this podcast, which is something that's exciting that I want to do and I'm excited to do today, there's things that pop up. Obviously, traffic could happen, different things could pop up, which goes back to say, give yourself some grace. But if you're frequently late, you're listening and you find yourself frequently missing the appointed time for things, what would you say to that person to help them overcome that little nuance? Or what would you say to that person to help them overcome their tendency of being late all the time? Because that was the moment for you that kind of jumped.
Yeah, it was an elder in the church that kind of just showing me a picture of me. It was my reflection, but they did it in a real nice way. It didn't embarrass me, but it was kind of showed me that there's people behind me looking at me, and what am I showing them? So what I would say is, and this is going to depend on, obviously, like if you're talking to a youth group or whoever you're speaking to, you got to know that person's personality as well. With 6 kids, I know there's 6 very different personalities. So that's 6 different kinds of conversations. So I say that for the listener, you got to know who you're talking to first. Because I'll say it this way, but then you have to disseminate this to the person you're talking to. Because what I would say is that you are your patterns. That's the person that shows up. Your pattern is who you are. So you are what you do consistently. It's not what you say. I could say, I'm this, I'm that, but if that person doesn't show up, then that's just words. And then those words become meaningless because you see, okay, well, he talks about being on time, but he's always late. Those two things are in conflict with each other. So I would say to that person is, if it's a young person, generally it's going to be they're staying up too late, way too late. We were that person at one point as well. So, hey, what are you doing that's so important that you have to be up at 1, 2 in the morning on a Saturday night, knowing that you got to be at church, right? That's a real authentic conversation that you can have. Because the answer is it's nothing that's that important that you got to be up that late, that you're dragging in the morning. Right. So that's part of discipline. And then it's a conversation of, because even if I was up till 2 a.m., I'm still going to be on time, right? Yeah. But that conversation has to look like, listen, this is what has to be done. How do you get there? How do we get to this point where that you're on time? Let's unpack what are you doing at night that you can't wake up on time? Or what's happening that you can't get out the door on time, especially if they're like a teenager that's driving themselves, right?
Yeah.
And you got to have the conversation. You got to have the root of it because going back to what we said earlier, maybe they didn't have that example. Maybe there's a lot of adults that don't get to church all the time, right? So maybe their example, and we're not talking about our church. We're talking about in general.
Praise God.
Churchgoers, people that go to church. I'm an example to them. My actions speak for me, even if my words haven't reached them. They see the consistency. And then so if somebody with 6 kids gets to church on time, then everybody in between, there is no excuse, right? I mean, because that's my wife and that's 3 daughters, so that's 4 heads of hair. And when you get to church on time, and all the women said amen. It's possible. It's possible, ladies. That's how it is. But here's the reality. The real truth is, it may sound harsh, but if it's a priority, you'll do it. If you want to show up somewhere, if I said, Sean, I got Cavs tickets, courtside. Let's go. Be there 7 o'clock tonight.
Yeah.
You're going to say, okay, we can do this podcast later. Let's go.
And you're going to be there early.
Yeah.
Because you got to find a place to park.
Right. So you're already considering all the different factors that we're going to do. Is it going to snow? What's it doing? But you're going to be there because it's important.
That's really interesting because I don't know anybody that would show up late to something like that. No. That they put investment in. They invested money and,
exactly.
And there's like priorities, right? It's just like where your priorities at for where you're on time or not.
Absolutely.
Right. Getting up to go to work, like if you get up at 5 in the morning, like I do, that's hard to do Monday through Friday. But for some reason, when I'm going steelhead fishing on a Saturday, number 1, I can't sleep. I'm excited.
Yeah.
Number 2, I'm up ready to go.
Before the alarm.
In time, before the alarm to get where I want to go. So I think it goes down to say, too, like your heart, where you're putting your passions at matter. And that will kind of direct if you're going to be
Yes.
excited about doing something or not. And so,
And do it if you're excited or not.
right,
Because the reality is it doesn't matter.
right.
If it has to get done, it has to get done.
Yeah.
And that's what people don't want it. That will offend somebody. Well, you don't know I have this going on in that. Because when you boil it down, so this is what I was telling Sean before we start recording, because like what I do and what I talk about, it doesn't make you feel warm and fuzzy. And we're talking about discipline and planning. And when you talk about those things, people can have defenses up because often there's somebody that's not doing those things, but they want to.
Yeah.
So we got to have the conversation around the thing that you want to get better at.
Right.
So I didn't mean to cut you off. But
No, you're good. I think it goes down to anything in life that you want to grow at. If you're trying to
Yes.
grow and develop into becoming who you could be and who you should be, you can't do that without discipline. You got to first have that moment to decide, I want to become what I'm supposed to become.
Yes.
And
very
then
good.
it's easy for me. That's what the big thing was. God gave me a vision for my life. And I knew that if I were to continue the way that I've always done things, I would not accomplish that. And so it goes back to the power four. That came through prayer. That calling, that call to action moment for me came through prayer.
Wow.
And then the other things kind of just, I realized, oh, well, I looked at the people who were successful around me that was doing what I want to do. And I looked at what they were doing and I tried to emulate that. And it's gotten me pretty far.
Awesome.
I had to learn how to be disciplined.
And you said it right there. It's a learning process.
Yeah.
So that's where give yourself the grace, but then also don't let yourself off the hook at the same time.
Right.
There's a balance. Like we all know when we could be doing better.
Yeah.
We all know when we give it our best effort. We all know if we put the time in. No one has to really tell you that. You know that in yourself.
Right.
So just and hold yourself accountable.
Proverbs 12:1 says, whoever loves discipline loves knowledge, but whoever hates correction is stupid.
That's Bible. That's
what
not us.
version is that? Does this say
It's
stupid?
NIV. It does. NIV
That's
version.
hilarious.
I like it plain. Sometimes you need it plain. Whoever loves you need to learn to love discipline.
Or you're stupid.
You're not stupid. The Lord loves you, but He loves you enough.
But
to
his
give
word
you-
says otherwise.
He loves you
Enough
enough.
to let you know this is what it is.
Listen, whose parent hasn't said, "Hey, don't be stupid"?
That's the word, right? So you can't argue with the word. Well, you could, but then there's also Bible verse about fools, right? But seriously, what you said and what the word said, that should be enough for somebody that's listening to say, you know what, I can do this because you can. It just takes the intentional effort, and you have to do the hard thing regardless of what it feels like. I don't always feel like doing a lot of things, but there's responsibility that I have. And then there's people that will call me, text me, or talk to me that they want to be encouraged or they need help being motivated. They need help being this and that. And sometimes I don't have it, but I can't say, you know what, I'm not feeling it right now. Come back to me another day.
Yeah.
You know, my well of wisdom is tapped out for the day. You know, if you're in ministry and leadership positions and things like that, like we are, you don't have that. Like I had a conversation with someone today that I wasn't intending to have, but they look up to me, want to know what I thought about some different things. And so we had a conversation unintentionally. It lasted like 30 minutes, right? But that's not what I was looking, not that I didn't want to have the conversation. It was unexpected. But some things will happen that are unexpected, but you still have to have those conversations. So it comes back to discipline is doing the things that you may not even feel like doing, but you do it anyway. And that's where people struggle with the
And I
do it
think-
anyway part.
Yeah, and I think that's where real growth happens. It's easy to use the example of exercise when you're talking about discipline. Last year, I went on like a running spree. I was a little overweight for my frame and size, and I didn't like the way I felt. And so I decided I was going to start lifting weights, exercising, start back up again, which there's a whole nother thing there. I committed to, I'm going to run a mile every day, and I'm going to lift weights 3 times a week, if not more. And I stayed with it, and I counted every calorie that I ate. So I knew exactly what was going in. I knew how many steps I took, how many calories I burnt, how many exercise minutes I put in, how much sleep I got. This thing's always on me, and so it calculated all of that. And so there were days where after teaching kindergartners or first graders or second, I did not want to go home and run a mile. I did not want to
can
go
imagine.
home. I didn't want to go back out to the gym and do the thing that I knew that I needed to do. But for me, it was like, no matter what, I'm going to get this in. At one point, the first mile running was difficult. The first mile, I didn't start off sprinting though.
Right.
The first mile was just a walk, and it was like that for weeks. And then I started to jog, and then I started to run. By the end, I had lost 20 pounds, and I was running without stopping a 5K, and it wouldn't be nothing. And I was able to,
really good.
I could run for 10 minutes and not throw up, which running is awful. But
Running's hard.
But
It is hard.
it was a mentality that I chose to say, well, let's see how far I can push this. I don't feel good, I can walk the mile. If I feel great, I'll jog the mile. But no matter what, I'm going to walk the mile. And there were some days where I had 8 miles in the day.
Wow.
In the day. And I saw progress, not in the first day, not in the first week, but if I consistently did it for months, I could start to see massive progress in my lungs. And on Fitbit, it tells you like, and we talk more about this in our fitness episode, but on the Fitbit, it tells you your cardio score. And I could I remember sending this to you last year. I would send you every time my cardio score would change. And it went from poor,
remember that, yeah.
it went from poor to for your age, this is great, which was cool to see. But that didn't happen.
Progress, yeah.
I didn't wake up some days. Some days I was sick. Some days I didn't feel good. Some days my kids kept me up all night. But no matter what, if I was sick or not, I was still walking that mile. And eventually I saw progress. And so I think that's discipline. And I hate to just
Absolutely.
bring it all to fitness stuff, but like I think that's the big deal. No matter what goals you're setting out, you have to set it in your mind. You have to have the mindset of no matter what, this is what's getting done. And Fred, your book is so powerful in that it helps
you.
people who have never had the opportunity. Maybe they feel passionate that they want the change. Maybe they feel excited that they want to start something. They set this goal. They feel passionate about it, but they don't know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
This book is a great blueprint for that.
You know, like kind of to bounce off of your story with running, obviously I'm exercise challenged. So
We're going to change that.
But something I can relate with that, and I know, Fred, you've kind of switched into music here. Some of the darkest times are, not darkest, but like the hardest times are when you're like alone, like practicing drums, right? Like we're in my cave right now. I've had some tears shed here, like over times when like you just spend hours just trying to get just a part or something in, and it just can't come together.
Yeah,
like so,
been there,
so
for
being
sure.
able to just like push through that, for me, it feels like a dark place because I can't push past that. There's physical barrier of being able to just hit a fill or know the song in general. But like preparing for like a live recording on an album, like that was probably like, I don't know. Would you say it's probably like the most you've ever prepared for, or do you consider like every service like at that caliber?
Yeah, so it was different from the standpoint of, so generally when I play something, I generally never play it exactly like the recording, like for our services or even like Battlefield or something like that. Like I'll play it, and it depends who the worship leader is, right? I'll play it as much as a lot of people, they'll say, okay, you just go ahead and do what you do. But for the live recording, for Brandy's song, they wanted us to play it exactly like the recording. So that was the most challenging thing for me because it was like, okay, so there wasn't any, because it was the live recording for her video, there was no room for my creativity, which is something that I always just naturally do. Mm-hmm. So that was a much harder preparation because I had to keep conditioning my mind to things that I would do. Don't do it, play it like how it is.
Yeah.
That was difficult for that reason.
Yeah.
And then obviously, it's not that, because I've talked to you about this, I don't put a lot of weight into one moment over another. I think how you prepare is how you prepare, period. But just the fact that you have to do it this way made the preparation different.
Yeah. That was probably challenging for you. Would you say that?
Yeah, because that's you're telling me to do something that I don't do.
Okay. So when you were preparing for that and it was challenging, how do you make yourself, like I said, sometimes I've been down here in tears just because I can't get a part and can't figure it out naturally without like having to count every single beat. So how do you like push yourself in those moments where something is hard, something is challenging, and you know you have to get it done, and you're trying to plan, you've prayed, you're trying to plan this, but you can't produce it because it's just not coming out. And maybe that's more natural for you because you're a much better drummer. But for me, I can't produce the things that I want to, the things I plan in my mind on drums. I can't produce.
Well,
you know, how do you push yourself in that?
Think about the analogy I just used with running. When I first started, I couldn't run the mile. Like I would throw up if I were to sprint a mile. I couldn't finish a mile. I would have to stop and walk, right?
Yeah.
I wanted to run a mile. I wanted to lose the weight. I wanted to do the thing that I set out to do, but I couldn't produce that on day one. Mm-hmm. And I'm not a drummer, but I can play the guitar a little bit. So I'm familiar with like practicing and learning. I think you just have to consistently work at it, and eventually you'll see the production of the result.
Yeah.
It goes back, and Fred, you can add to that, but I think it goes back to do something consistently every day in your 24, and it will produce that long-term goal over time.
Yeah. I'm kind of curious, like, to pick your brain a little, like, if you get into those modes, like, where you can't physically produce what you're planning. You know what I'm trying to say? Maybe.
So there, no, I do understand it. So it's like, for me, it's more so for me, it will be a preparation thing. Because, like, there's some times where I get to a part where I'm like, okay, well, that feel, I'm trying to, for me, use this, how would I do that feel? Or how can I add to it or do something? But if I am stuck, because, every now and then, I'll be stuck and I'll try to think about it. There's two things. One is I would just keep listening to it over and over again to hear it and then see myself playing it. And then if that is not working in that moment, rather than get overly frustrated, I'll just take a beat, maybe like 10, 15 minutes and walk outside, just do something, play with the kids or something, and then come back to it and then kind of reset, as opposed to just sit and kind of be frustrated. Because I have done that before, and that's obviously is not productive. And it's like, I can't get this part. So it's more so, either I'll just keep listening to it over and over again. Generally, that'll be the fix, because then I'll hear something that I didn't hear before, and then I'll play it. And that goes to my preparation, because how I learned was I learned by ear. Because when I was young, I didn't play. The guys older than me played, and I watched them, and I didn't get any time to play. So I would watch everything they did, and I just waited for it to be my time. So, like, I never learned notes and things. I memorized what I saw. Mm-hmm. So, like, and that's still like how I am today. I'll hear something, and I play it in my head before I actually practice it on the set.
Yeah.
And that's still how I do it. But that's just how I am. But to answer, I would say for whoever's listening, if you're stuck, don't get frustrated. Just, it's okay to take a couple minutes and just relax and, pray, just something different than getting more, because then because you mentioned like dark place. So someone can get stuck and they're like, oh, I'm never going to be able to get this. And they'll start speaking these different things because they're so frustrated about the moment. So just don't let the moment overtake you.
Yeah.
It's okay to relax, shut it down for half an hour, come back to it, and then, refocus at that time.
So this can translate right into any aspect of your life. In moments in life, you're trying to run a mile or play drums, or you're trying to nail this job or anything in life, and you're planning it, but you physically aren't able to produce it, right? If you're exercise challenged like me, I can't. Maybe I could probably run a mile. Maybe not. I don't know. I'm overconfident.
You could walk a mile.
But you can step back, take a minute, pray,
Absolutely.
Just relax, get it off your mind, go fishing, do something, and then come back to it.
You can literally plug the Power 4 into anything.
That's pretty awesome.
So
yeah.
Did you pray about the set, for example? Did you pray about how am I going to get to running this mile or doing more to a mile? If I'm preaching, teaching, whatever I'm doing, there's going to be a plan for all of it. Mm-hmm. I mean, if there's not, then there's something wrong with what you're doing.
I think,
my
too,
opinion.
If there's not, eventually there will be, and it's just going to take you longer to get to the point where you want to be if you don't have a plan.
My wife will tell you, I'm all about efficiency. Whatever I'm doing, how can this be more efficient? She'll ask her about it next time you see her, and she'll laugh because I don't waste time. Like, I'm the type, when we go into the store, I know what I want, and I want to get out. she wants to linger and look at this, look at that. So I have to sometimes reprogram in that moment that, okay, I'm out with my wife and we have this time and this is our time. This isn't my going in, get out. But that's how I always look at time. What's the highest and best use of the time? Now, women that are listening, not with my wife, right? So I have to remind myself, okay, we're out on a date. We're doing whatever. This is not me being my time conscious mode. So I got to give myself grace that, hey, this is
It's a
not
balance.
This is not about me right now. My wife wants to look at, the Christmas decorations or whatever it is, and she loves that. So I have to enjoy that with her and not rush her in and out of stores.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think you talk about efficiency, and we're about at the end of this episode, and I think it goes back down to, the kayaker at the beginning. That wasn't the smartest way to catch the steelhead. There was a better way.
Wasn't efficient.
Wasn't efficient. And so I think for our listeners out there,
E-fish.
efficient.
Brother LeVar, if
My.
you're listening.
Wow.
You would love it.
But I hope that this episode has encouraged our listeners. We want to thank Brother Fred Parrott for coming on the podcast today. Where can people find you?
So most easy would be Instagram, Fred Parrott Speaks, I believe is my handle. Sorry, I'm not caffeinated enough at the moment. But yeah, Fred Parrott Speaks. That's the easiest way to find me. Working on getting the website up for launching out into the speaking career and things of that nature. But yeah, there and on Facebook it's the same. Yeah, connect with me.
And where can people buy Power 4?
So right now you can go on Amazon. Just type in the Power 4. It should come up. Practical and practical.
We'll put a link in the description.
Yes.
We hope this episode encouraged you, made you laugh. Maybe it inspired you to cast out a little deeper in your life and discipline. Before we go, though, we want to leave you with a verse. No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful later on. However, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have trained for it. Hebrews 12:11. Let's remember that whether we're working our faith, our families, or even fishing, staying disciplined in God's word will always bring a production or a harvest.
Yeah.
So we hope you chime in next time. We're going to be hitting an episode every week. You know what to do. Like, subscribe, leave us a review, share this episode with a friend who might need some encouragement. Share this with the person who's always late all the time. And we'll see you next time on the Casting Faith podcast.
See you later.
Like, comment, and subscribe.